soy Dani Mantella y estamos aquí en Kinótico, en el Festival de San Sebastián, en este set patrocinado por Repsol, en el Hotel María Cristina, donde vamos a hablar con talento nacional e internacional, como es el caso de James Vanderbilt, director de Nuremberg. Welcome to San Sebastián.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is your second film as a director. You have written almost every genre that exists, but both of your films are political. Do you think that's like your secret or not so secret love?
I think I'm in love with history, and I think for me it's more about sort of paying attention to the past and looking back into the past and just sort of finding stories that I feel are interesting and sort of timeless. And so my first film, Truth, was about journalism, and this is obviously about World War II.
What did you like about this book, The Nazi and the Psychiatrist, that was published 10 years ago?
Yeah, so it was 13 years ago, actually.
13 years
No, I know because it's been a 13-year journey. And the book's written by Jack L. High, who I knew beforehand. And I read the book proposal for it while he was trying to get it sold as a book. And it was the quickest I'd ever said yes to anything in my life, because I felt like the main relationship between Dr. Kelley, who Rami Malek plays, and Hermann Göring, who Russell Crowe plays, I just found so fascinating and such an interesting way into telling a story in this time period.
Russell Crowe is really impressive. It's really frightening.
Yes.
How was the choice of casting him?
It was, I always knew that I wanted somebody with Russell's sort of star power and gravitas to play the part, because Göring historically was actually very charismatic. You know, he was very funny and charming. Somebody once described him as the nicest dinner guest you would ever have. And so the idea of having somebody, and they're wonderful character actors who could have played it, but having somebody with that kind of movie star power who could kind of suck you in and sort of seduce you in the same way that he does to Dr. Kelley was always really important to me. And I was lucky enough to, it took me years to write the first draft of the script and got it to Russell, and thank God without meeting me, he said yes.
And why was it difficult to find the right approach to this book, this story?
I think it was a couple of different things. I think in developing it, you know, the book itself is really just about those two characters, but as I started researching the time period and the Nuremberg trials and how they were put together, the story kept growing. I read the story of Justice Jackson, who was a U.S. Supreme Court justice, who basically said, we have to put these men on trial. The armies didn't want to put the men on trial. They just wanted to execute them. But he said, no, this is important. People need to see what the Nazis have done. And so he almost was sort of building the airplane while he flew it. And then he became the chief prosecutor. So I knew I wanted to fold that story in it. And then I read the story of Howie Traced, who is one of the translators who Leo Woodall plays. And that's an incredible story I don't want to spoil, but I was like, oh, I have to put that into the film. So I think the challenge for me was it just grew and grew and grew. And you know, you only have so many minutes to tell a feature film.
It's really interesting the different kind of energies that have that the leading cast have. We have Rami, which is like a very special animal. We have Michael Shannon, the same, and Russell Crowe and Leo Goodell that has that. Well, you were talking about that. How was casting like this poker of players in this story?
Well, I mean, I got very lucky too, because it's a wonderful cast, and when you have two Academy Award winners at the top of the call sheet, you know, you're going to have a lot more choices to take from. But I always sort of feel like casting is almost like cooking. You know, each actor is a different flavor, and so you want to make sure that all the different flavors complement each other, but also aren't all the same. And we had a wonderful casting director, John Papsadera, who casts all Christopher Nolan's films, so I knew I was in good hands there. And you know, they just, I love that they all have different energies. And then one of the other things I think was really interesting for me was, you know, Michael Shannon usually sort of plays a bad guy, and it was really interesting to have him play someone this heroic. Russell is, you know, the movie star good guy, and it was interesting to have him play someone so horrific. So at every sort of step of the way, I wanted to put someone in these roles who brought a different kind of thing to it. John Slattery has such a wonderful comedic bent to him, and so I wanted someone like that in that part. So it just grew in a wonderful way.
Every film that I think has at least one make it or break it scene, and I'm thinking of the moment of the truth between Rami and Russell Crowe by the end of the movie. How was directing that? Do you direct?
It was, I mean, it was a really, you know, we prepared a lot for it, and it was one of the last days that they worked together, and I think they had been building towards it in a wonderful way, and they just kind of went at each other in the cell, and you know, so much of directing is casting, and so much of it is preparing with the actors and talking about the script, and I did that both with them individually and collectively, and we did some rehearsal. We didn't do much rehearsal because I really wanted to make sure they were saving it for camera. and then we shot it, and they just tore into each other in the most beautiful way for me as a director. And I felt very, but that was always the scene that I sort of said, this is the scene that has to work. If this scene works, the movie works. Yeah.
Hey, when it comes to the trial, we see a graphic display or images from the Holocaust.
Yes.
How were the conversation about how much to show and how to show it?
Well, from the very beginning, from the very first draft of the script, I said, we're going to show the real footage. We're not going to recreate anything. We're not going to shoot anything, because the images themselves, I think, are so powerful. And I didn't want to play music over it. I didn't want to, I wanted to be as accurate as possible to what was shown in the courtroom. The courtroom, actually, they showed about 56 minutes worth of footage, which obviously we couldn't do and is incredibly punishing. But, I really wanted to do it in a way that honored what had happened, both in the courtroom and obviously in the camps. And on the day we shot it, and I told all of the actors too when they signed on, I said, look, that footage is out there, it's on YouTube, do me a favor, don't watch it if you haven't watched it, because I want your reactions to be as fresh as possible. So on the day, we set up a real projector in the courtroom, and I went out and said a few words first, and I said to everybody, we have to honor what's happened here, and we set up 4 cameras, each at one of our principals, and then we had a moment of silence, and then we rolled the footage. And that was a hard day on set, but everybody was really committed to the film and wonderful, and came through it beautifully.
Was it hard to get the money for this film? Because as I was saying before, this is the kind of film that I grew up loving and watching, but they are not so easy to make and to watch nowadays in the studio system, at least.
Yeah, it was harder. That's why it took 13 years, I think. But it's the movies I grew up with too, JFK and Apollo 13 and Glory, movies that are about historically impactful moments, but also are hopefully entertaining for the audience and take you on an emotional journey. And that was always, really the key for me, was that I didn't want it to feel like 2 hours and change of me lecturing you or wagging a finger, that you could actually be taken in by these characters and go on this journey with them. And so it was hard. And luckily, Richard Stapperstein at Bluestan Entertainment and also Walden Media ultimately stepped up and said the same thing. Movies like this don't get made that much anymore, and we believe in you as a director, and we believe in this script. And Russell is attached at that point already, and they said, let's give it a shot.
I was really intrigued after reading you say that you looked at The Silence of the Lambs to the kind of chemistry and dynamic between the characters. But it makes total sense after watching the film, because there is a fascination between them.
Yeah, I loved the idea of that Rami's character is trying to explore the nature of evil, and then it's really a psychological duel between these two men. Each of them are trying to get something out of the other. And so the cat and mouse of that, we talked a lot about Silence of the Lambs, and and again, also just sort of emotionally grounding you with those two characters, understanding what they want. And neither of them, I think, get what they want in the end. I don't want to spoil anything too much, but it's the fact of how much they affect each other and each other's lives in a way I think that neither of them anticipated happening at the beginning.
By the end of the film, do you make a connection with the present, talking about how fear is dangerous nowadays, and what can make to the world, Why was that important for you?
Well, it was important to me even 13 years ago, because I think it's a message that's is sort of timeless. When I wrote it 13 years ago, it felt it was important to the world then, and it feels important to the world now. And unfortunately, I think it's going to feel important to the world in the future. But I had 2 grandfathers who fought in World War II, and for me and my generation, our generation, I think that was a time you could sort of touch. You knew people who had lived through that and gone through that and had those stories. And now when I talk to my children about that time period, it's like talking to them about the American Revolution. It feels so far in the past, and I think making that past come alive again for people was really important to me. And I love film and cinema, and I always find that film and cinema and stories are the things that touch us and make us remember. Facts and figures are one thing, and we can memorize them and take tests in history class, but being taken on an emotional journey by a film, there's nothing like it.
Angelina Jolie was here a few days ago, and she was viral because she said that she loves America, but she doesn't really understand it right now. You love history, you love journalism. How do you think we are going to talk about these days in the future?
I don't know. It's not for me to say. I love America very, very, very much, and I feel like, you know, like anything, there are, and I'm sure here too, there's certain things that your country does, your government does, that maybe you're not as proud of, but you're proud of where you come from and who you are and the potential of what your people can be, and that's how I feel about America.
What do you think is the responsibility of storytellers, of filmmakers, regarding what to say, what to not to say in these moments?
To say or not to say, I always get nervous when people say not to say something, you know? I think responsibility, I can only define for myself. I can't define for anybody else. The thing that I love about cinema is that we get to put ourselves and our beliefs into our art and then put that art out into the world. And then that art belongs to the world. And what people take from that art is up to them, not to me. And that's why it's such a beautiful art form.
There are not that many movies about Nuremberg. We had the one from the 60s, obviously,
yes.
which was eye-opening.
Brilliant film.
Did you go back to it while prepping this one?
We did, yeah. I mean, it's one of my favorite films. And, you know, the thing about that film is it takes place much later in the trial, sort of where it's hard to get, you know, judges to actually show up for it. Spencer Tracy comes in because, you know, sort of no one else will do it. It's kind of, you're much farther down the line. This, to me, was fascinating because it was the first trial, and it was the make or break one, and the one that if it didn't work, sort of all the marbles kind of would be lost. But one of the things Darius Wolski, incredible director of photography, and I did right before we went to shoot the movie is we screened it again for ourselves, and we looked at sort of how Stanley Kramer had framed the shots. And he does this really interesting thing in the opening statement where he takes a camera and goes 360 degrees around the lead prosecutor. And so we did the same thing with Michael Shannon. We didn't use the whole shot in the film, but it was sort of, that was our sort of tip of the hat and homage to that film, which is incredible. And just like that film had so many different types of actors in it. You had Judy Garland in it, you know, you had Spencer Tracy in it, you had Burt Lancaster in it, but all different types of actors, all different types of flavor. Oh my gosh, yeah, Marlene Dietrich. I mean, like so many different, you know, types of actors in one film. And I think the spirit of that was something I wanted to embrace with this movie as well.
You had like 13 or 12 years before doing your second film.
Yes.
Do you think it's going to take that long for the third one?
I hope not. I do. You know, I have 3 kids now. I had 2 young kids when I did my first film, and directing a film is a wonderful thing, but it takes you away from home a lot. And so a lot of the time in between is wanting to be there for my kids and watching them grow up. And writing and producing allowed me to do that a little bit more than directing did. But I had such a wonderful time making this film, and I want to stay in the chair and do it more and more. Now that they're teenagers, they don't care about me. So,
with your first film, you had the luxury and the opportunity to work with Robert Redford.
Yeah.
What did that mean for you? What's your warmest memory from that film with him?
He was just such a kind man and such a kind man to filmmakers, you know, and so I had him in my first film. When he directed his first film, it won Best Picture and Best Director, and it was Ordinary People. So he knew sort of how intimidating he could be to people, and so he said to me, look, I'm just here as an actor. I'm never going to look at the monitor. I'm going to do whatever you need me to do. And he knew that any chance encounter with him would be a story that people told for the rest of their lives. And I remember going to dinner with him. The first time I went to dinner with him, we sat down, and he said, "Don't order much." And I said, you know, I was like, am I fat? I don't know why, you know. And the waiter came over. He said, I'll just have a small salad. And I said, I'll just have a small salad too. And the waiter went away. And then the waiter comes back with 4 courses and says, Mr. Redford, the chef has heard you're here and he wants you to sample. And they brought out every single thing on the menu. And he knew that that was going to be, every time he went out to dinner, that was going to be the night he had, because it was so important for people to have Robert Redford in their restaurant. So he was warning me, we're going to eat everything on the menu because you're here. So don't order much.
That's really cool. We like to end our interviews asking, what film would you recommend to the 18-year-old James?
Oh.
And why?
It took me, for a film, a modern film, or just any film?
Any film.
It took me longer to see the classics than I should have. I didn't see Casablanca till I was in my 30s, and I remember, which is one of my favorite films, and I remember watching it on a Sunday afternoon, and my wife, my now wife, was in the kitchen cooking dinner, and I watched it, and it just blew me away, and I walked into the kitchen, and I said, oh my God, this film is so incredible, and my wife looked at me, she goes, Yeah, it's Casablanca. Like, what? Why do you think people have been talking about it for 80 years? So I would have gotten to that one sooner.
It's never too late to discover the classics.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, and please enjoy San Sebastián.
I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Seguimos aquí con más entrevistas en este espacio de Kinótico, patrocinado por Repsol, y volvemos con nuevas entrevistas.